Last Sunday, at 9:17 p.m., my brother leaned across the dinner table, his fork still in his hand, and hissed, "You were adopted. That's why they treat you like this." My chest locked up, the room spun, I dropped my glass, and cold water ran across the table, dripping into my lap. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as my mother just sat there in silence, not denying it. That's when I realized the worst truth of my life wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It was detonated right in front of me. 5 minutes later, I locked myself in my room, heart pounding, already planning the one move that would change everything. My name is Ayaan, I'm 29 years old, and I've spent most of my life trying to hold together a family that never quite held me back in return. By day, I'm an assistant accountant at a small logistics firm in Chicago. Long hours, modest pay, but I never complained. I grew up learning that if you just keep your head down and work hard, people would see your worth eventually. Except at home, they never did. My brother Samir, 2 years older than me, was the golden child. He had the spotlight in every room we walked into. Captain of the basketball team in high school, the one my parents bragged about at every family dinner, the one who could do no wrong. And me? I was the afterthought, the quiet shadow, the one they forgot to mention. I still remember one Christmas morning, 2011, I was 15. He got the new iPhone 4, wrapped in a box with gold ribbon. I got a pair of socks and a second-hand jacket, one size too big. My mother had smiled and said, "You'll grow into it." At the time, I laughed it off, but inside, something cracked. The pattern never stopped. Birthdays forgotten, report cards overlooked. When I graduated from college with honors, they didn't even attend the ceremony. Samir's minor promotion at his first job, they threw a full family party, invited 47 people, catered Indian food from Devon Avenue. What was at risk for me wasn't just love, it was identity. Every day I asked myself, am I really one of them? Or am I just living in someone else's house, playing the role of a son they never wanted? But still, I tried. I cooked for them. I helped Dad with his bills. I drove Mom to her appointments. Because deep down, I thought if I kept proving myself, if I gave enough, one day I'd be seen. Little did I know, the reason I felt invisible wasn't just favoritism. It was something far darker, something that would rip apart the last shred of belonging I had left. And it all began with one sentence my brother spat at me in anger. It happened on a Sunday evening, May 14th, 7:42 p.m. I remember the exact time because the clock on the microwave was blinking red as if mocking me. I had just finished setting the dinner table. Lasagna, garlic bread, the kind of meal I rarely made but wanted everyone to enjoy. Samir came in late, again, tossing his car keys onto the counter with that casual arrogance he wore like a second skin. He looked at the food, smirked, and said, "Trying too hard, little brother?" I swallowed my irritation, forcing a smile. Just thought we could eat together for once. That's when it happened. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp and cruel in a way I'd never seen before. He laughed, not the kind of laugh that fills a room, but the kind that cuts through bone. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Get what?" I asked. He tilted his head, and then the words came like a dagger. "You were adopted. That's why they treat you like this. That's why you'll never be one of us." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. My body went cold, a rush of ice shooting through my veins. My throat tightened as if the room itself was strangling me. I searched his face for some sign he was joking, some smirk that would undo the words, but all I saw was that smug satisfaction, the look of someone who knew they'd just detonated a bomb. "Stop lying," I managed to whisper, but my voice cracked. He leaned closer, eyes glinting. "Ask them yourself. That's why Dad never looks at you the same way, why Mom never brags about you. You're not blood, Ayaan. You never were." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents, who had just walked into the room, froze. My mother's face went pale, my father's jaw tightened, and in that silence, I had my answer. I felt something die inside me at that moment. The walls of the only home I had ever known became foreign, like I was suddenly trespassing in a house of strangers. the smell of lasagna mixed with betrayal, making me nauseous. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice shaking. My mother's lips trembled, but no sound came out. My father simply looked away. That was their first mistake. That's when I realized. I had lived 29 years of my life chasing love that was never meant for me. And in that instant, a seed of rage took root, growing into something I knew would one day demand justice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. Every creak in the walls felt like it was whispering secrets I was never meant to hear. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Samir's words replaying like a broken tape. "You were adopted. That's why they treat you like this." By 2:13 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and went straight to the old mahogany cabinet in the living room, the one my father kept locked with a tiny brass key. I'd seen him open it 1,000 times, stuffing away tax documents, property deeds, even my grandfather's letters. If there was truth to what my brother said, it had to be in there. I found the key in the usual place, taped under the drawer of my father's desk. My hands shook as I turned it. The click of the lock sounded louder than thunder in the silent house. Inside, I found a mess of papers. Old insurance policies, bank statements with numbers that felt painfully real. $47,000 for a property tax settlement, $19,600 withdrawn for medical expenses I'd never heard of. Then, buried under a stack of yellowing files, I saw it. An envelope, sealed but brittle with age. My name, Ayaan, scribbled across the front in my mother's handwriting. I tore it open. The first page was an adoption certificate dated August 4th, 1994. My birth name wasn't even Ayaan, it was Arjun. My biological parents, unknown. The second page was a letter written by my adoptive mother. "We wanted you to feel no different, no less loved, but we feared the truth would hurt you." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had been chasing a love that was never meant to exist. Because it wasn't love, it was guilt disguised as parenting. But what broke me wasn't the adoption itself. It was the discovery that they had used me as a shield. I found hospital bills from years ago, my adoption status listed under dependent coverage, notes in the margins showing how much money they saved by claiming me. I wasn't their son, I was their tax break, their insurance card, their safety net. I should have collapsed right then, but instead something hardened inside me. If I was nothing more than paperwork to them, then I would turn their own papers into weapons. I spent weeks quietly gathering everything. Bank statements showing Samir's business trips, funded by my father's accounts, property deeds that excluded me by name, old text messages where my mother dismissed me with one-line replies while writing paragraphs to Samir. Breadcrumbs everywhere, leading to one truth. This wasn't just neglect, it was deliberate erasure. By the third week, I had built a folder on my laptop labeled Justice. Inside were scans of every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence that proved not only my adoption, but also how they had funneled resources to Samir while I was left with scraps. And then, like fate, I stumbled across the final clue. In the bottom of my father's drawer, hidden under a file labeled Tax Audits 2018, was a notarized draft of his will. My name wasn't there, not once. Samir was to inherit everything. The house, the accounts, even the land in India my grandparents had left behind. Me? I was listed as a dependent beneficiary, meaning I'd only get a one-time payout of $12,000. $12,000 for a lifetime of silence, loyalty, and service. That was their second mistake. Because that's when I knew. This wasn't going to be a plea for love anymore. This was going to be a war. I had one card left to play, exposure. And if I played it right, not only would Samir lose everything he thought he owned, but my parents would have to watch as the son they dismissed became the one who destroyed their facade. Little did they know, the countdown had already begun. It all came to a head-on. October 3rd, 6 p.m. sharp. My father had organized a grand family dinner at Ramada Banquet Hall, a place they only rented for big occasions. Samir's promotions, anniversaries, anything that celebrated their version of success. This time, It was to announce that Samir was being made a partner in his firm. Nearly 80 guests were invited. Extended family, business colleagues, even our old neighbors. I was there too, sitting quietly at the edge of the long mahogany table, clutching my phone like a detonator. They thought I was just background noise. That was their third mistake. As speeches began, Samir stood at the center, beaming in a new Armani suit. He raised a glass and smirked toward me. "Some of us were just born for greatness," he said, his voice amplified by the hall's speakers. Laughter followed, except mine. That was the cue. I connected my laptop to the projector that was meant to display a slideshow of Samir's achievements. But instead, the first slide that appeared froze everyone in their seats. The truth they never wanted you to know. Gasps rippled across the hall. My father shot up from his seat, furious. "Turn that off, Ayaan!" But it was too late. One by one, the slides revealed everything I had gathered. A scanned copy of my adoption certificate, the inked date, August 4th, 1994, flashing larger than life. Bank transfers of $47,000 and $19,600 withdrawn under the guise of medical expenses, but used to pay off Samir's gambling debts. Screenshots of text messages between Samir and my mother. "Don't tell Ayaan. He doesn't need to know. He's just different." Every new image hit harder than the last. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, whispers turning into full-on murmurs. My uncle muttered, "So it's true." Then came the final blow, the draft of my father's will. The projector highlighted the line, "All assets and properties to be transferred solely to Samir Khan. Dependent beneficiary, Ayaan Khan, $12,000. I let the silence hang. The weight of betrayal wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs to carry in front of every person they respected. Samir's face drained of color. He stormed toward me, hissing through clenched teeth, "You ruined everything!" I met his eyes and whispered back, "No, brother." "You did." Then, loud enough for the hall to hear, I added, "This is the family I served, the parents I protected, the brother I trusted. And this is what they gave me in return." My mother broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. My father tried to grab the laptop, but 3 cousins blocked him, demanding answers. The guests weren't on his side anymore. They wanted the truth. That was their 4th mistake. But I wasn't done. What no one knew was that 2 weeks before, I had already filed a petition with a lawyer, using the very evidence I had displayed. The inheritance laws in Illinois gave me legal grounds to challenge the will on the basis of fraud and misrepresentation. And while they were busy scrambling at that banquet, my lawyer had already emailed every guest the evidence folder, scans, receipts, everything. By the time the night was over, the truth was viral within our community WhatsApp groups. The family they tried to erase was now the family name they couldn't wash clean. The next day, Samir's firm rescinded his partnership offer, citing reputation risks. My father's business associates pulled out of deals. And my mother? She stopped leaving the house, too ashamed to face the whispers at the grocery store. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg. The documents had spoken louder than I ever could, and watching them fall apart, publicly, socially, financially, was the sweetest justice, because that was the card they never thought I'd play. Within 48 hours, word had spread across every WhatsApp group, community dinner table, and office hallway. Samir's arrogant grin, the one he wore like armor, was gone. His firm officially withdrew his partnership offer, and a memo leaked online. Due to reputational damage, we cannot proceed with Mr. Khan's promotion. His $120,000 bonus? Gone. My father, once the respected patriarch of our extended family, could no longer show his face at the mosque without whispers following him. The man who always spoke in booming authority now walked with slumped shoulders, avoiding eye contact. And my mother, she stopped calling me Beta altogether, as if avoiding the word might undo the truth everyone now knew. She retreated into silence, her reputation as the perfect hostess shredded by the revelation that she'd spent decades deceiving even her closest relatives. The house I grew up in turned hostile. For the first time, they were the ones walking on eggshells, while I sat in calm, steady silence. That was their fifth mistake, underestimating how heavy the silence could be when I finally chose not to fill it. 3 months later, the will that excluded me was no longer valid. My lawyer, using the evidence I'd gathered, had the court place a stay order on the estate transfer. The judge looked directly at my father and said, "You cannot deny legal rights to an adopted child. Blood or not, he is your son in the eyes of the law." That moment was poetic. For decades, they had treated me like an outsider, and now by law they were forced to acknowledge me as the very thing they refused to see, a rightful heir. The estate was frozen, their accounts scrutinized. And for the first time, Samir's arrogance met something it couldn't charm or buy off: cold, hard justice. But the real victory wasn't in money or inheritance. It was in watching their world flip upside down. The people who once dismissed me were now calling me, whispering, "We always knew you were different, Ayaan. We respect you for standing up." Validation tasted sweet, but not as sweet as the calm I carried now. For years, I had begged for scraps of love. Now I understood something deeper. I didn't need their love to define me. That was their first mistake, I whispered to myself one night, sipping coffee alone in my apartment, and their last. The betrayal had burned me, yes, but it also forged me. I was no longer the invisible son, no longer the quiet shadow. I was the man who turned their silence into a weapon, who took their erasure and carved it into proof of my existence. Samir? Last I heard, he moved into a smaller apartment, his reputation in tatters, still trying to rebuild. My parents? They live quietly, the grand dinner's gone, the house too large for the shame it holds. And me? I finally invested in myself. I started a small financial consultancy, using everything I learned from the very documents they used against me. Within a year, I made more than my old job ever gave me. The scars remain, yes, but so does the lesson. Family isn't the blood that betrays you, it's the truth that frees you. And as I look back now, I realize what they thought would break me only became the reason I rose higher than they ever imagined.